Revive family, it's Michael here. Hope everyone is doing well. As you can see, I'm in the park today and I'll be bringing the devotional for us this week. Wanted to let you know that we do have our next Revive Zoom meeting this upcoming Saturday, April 24th at 2 p.m. So really hope you can join us because we are starting a new series this week called Rebuilding. And we felt like this would be a good topic, a good theme for us to be talking about right now as more and more people are getting vaccinated, as we start to see things open up. We know that all of us are going to have to be figuring out over the next few months what our lives are to look like, revisioning for what life can be like as we transition into, hopefully, a post-pandemic world. So for this series, we're actually going to be studying a book of the Bible, the book of Nehemiah. And this book focuses on this character, Nehemiah, who leads the efforts to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and help to reestablish the Israelite community there, both physically and spiritually. So it would be great if you wanted to journey along with us, read the book with us as we go through. Each week that we have a Revive devotional, we'll be going over a section of the book of Nehemiah. For this week, I'm going to be covering chapter 1 and part of chapter 2. But before I get into that, I do want to give some background context for this book. So the book of Nehemiah tells of Israel's history, and the point in Israel's history that we are in is the aftermath of the Babylonian captivity. So probably a lot of us know that the nation of Israel was conquered by the Babylonian Empire. They destroyed Jerusalem. They took away many of the Israelites into captivity, and Babylon was the ruling power for some time. Then later on, that power shifts over to the Persians, and under Cyrus the Great, the Israelites are permitted to begin returning to their homeland. Now, Nehemiah is not one of those who goes back right away, or he actually was born in captivity, so he's never been to Jerusalem. And Nehemiah is a character who actually is in a privileged position in Persia. He's cupbearer to the king. So Nehemiah comes onto the scene in around the 5th century BCE, and he's serving as cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. And the book opens up with Nehemiah getting word about the people in Jerusalem. And he hears that the people are in distress because the walls of Jerusalem are still broken down, the gates burned down. And when he hears this, Nehemiah begins to weep. And he has this emotional response. He begins to mourn and fast and pray for the people in Jerusalem. And I'd actually like to read the prayer that he lifts up to God for the people in Nehemiah chapter 1. So starting in verse 5, Nehemiah prays this: Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you, day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins that we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant, and the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. And so after he prays this, in chapter 2, Nehemiah proceeds to ask King Artaxerxes if he could go to Jerusalem and help rebuild the walls there. And the king not only lets him go, he actually sends men and resources to help Nehemiah in the rebuilding project. Now, what's striking to me about this whole story is that Nehemiah is not in Jerusalem. He is not suffering because the walls are broken down. But when he hears of the distress of the people, he not only prays for them, but he identifies with them. If you look back in that prayer, he uses language that is inclusive. He says, we Israelites, we have committed the sins. We have failed to obey the commands. And he prays to God to remember his faithfulness to the people. You see, Nehemiah is the one who is going to go back and lead this rebuilding effort, but it's not for himself. It's for the people in Jerusalem. Nehemiah himself, he is in a privileged position. He's doing just fine as cupbearer to the king. But his character and this book is a reminder for us that when we talk about rebuilding, it's not just for ourselves, but it's for everyone around us. It's for our whole community as well. In some ways, I can relate to Nehemiah in that when I look back on this past year, I see the different ways that COVID-19 has impacted each of us. And for me personally, I know that I've been quite fortunate in how things have turned out. I've been able to keep my job. I was able to live with friends, have community during this past year. And I've really been enjoying our Revive Zoom meetings together. I know that there are people who have had it so much worse, for whom COVID-19 has been a truly traumatic experience. People who have lost their jobs, their loved ones, who have had to sacrifice certain experiences or dreams that they were hoping for in 2020. The group that actually has been put on my heart the most recently has been parents of young kids. As you know, I'm a manager at my workplace, and actually 2 of my direct reports are now parents. One of them has 2 young kids, and one of them just gave birth to a baby girl. And let me just tell you, I know from hearing from them that life as a parent of a young kid has been really, really hard this past year. With distanced learning, so much more just falls on the parents and the kids and the teachers. Everyone's doing more, and everyone's having a really hard time. And when I look at my coworkers who even have the same types of responsibilities and tasks that I do, but by being young parents, there's just a mountain of hurdles that they have that I don't have to deal with. And so I bring this up, and God has highlighted them for me right now, because when I look at Nehemiah, he doesn't take an individual mindset when he thinks about the future or when he thinks about rebuilding for Israel. He really takes this more collective mindset about thinking about the group and thinking about those who are most in need right now. And I think it's a reminder for us that as we think about rebuilding and reestablishing our lives post-pandemic, that we also need to be thinking about those who have been most impacted. Parents and children and people who are marginalized. And so I want to encourage us to start, when we go through this book together and talk more about the process of rebuilding, that we take on this bigger framework, this broader view of what it means to rebuild, that it's not just about us. And so just some quick examples of what this means. This means that, it's not just about getting vaccinated ourselves, but it's about thinking about the safety and health of everyone around us. And it's not just about rethinking our systems and our structures so that they work for some of us or work for us, but that it works for those who have been hit the hardest, like our parents, like minority groups. And if we can start thinking in that way, then we really begin to see that we're all in this together. That it's on each of us to do our part to rebuild together a world that works not just for some of us, but for all of us. And particularly keeping in mind those who are suffering and most in need right now. And so, Revive family, I want to encourage us to be attentive and prayerful as we look forward to rebuilding. That our eyes would be open and our ears would be attentive to those who are crying out because they are in pain, because they are suffering right now. And I also pray that we can use the privilege and the influence that God has blessed us with to help those who are in need. And I also want to speak to those, maybe there are some of you listening here, that you have been the one who has been hit really hard during the pandemic. That you are going through this traumatic experience, whether it's from losing someone or just having all these obstacles thrown at you. I want you to know that the God that we see in the Bible and the God that is affirmed in the book of Nehemiah is a God who hears and responds to the cries of his people. God knows what each of us is going through, and God responds to our cries. And so, brothers and sisters, I pray that God would speak to each of us as we begin going through this book, and as we vision together about what rebuilding can look like, not only for us, but for everyone around us as well. Grace and peace to you, my friends.